the October regular board meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District to order. First item is setting the meeting agenda.
I just had one question on the Banta properties under new business, and I was just wondering why that wasn't under old business. It seems like that's something that's been discussed in the past.
Correct. Yeah, I think maybe only because I was thinking of a new work order, or request for services, but you're right, we obviously have it as a,
And then, well, yeah, I guess we can discuss that when we get to that, but.
yeah, it should be under the old business.
All right.
And we wanted to add an item E under old business to enter a summary for the administrator's performance review. We didn't do that in the September 26th meeting, so we want to add that to the record tonight. So, any other additions or changes?
Where do we want to place the Banta one then?
We can put it first thing under old business. We can just leave it in the order it's in, but just call it old business.
Maybe A1 and A2?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Chuck.
the item that you added, personnel review summary, would be a summary of the discussion at the September 12th meeting? I believe.
Was that what? Yeah, September 12th, right. We were going to enter it into the 26th minutes or record, but we forgot to do it, so we're catching up. All right, anything else?
The consent agenda, I just wanted to remove September 5th because I have some questions for Emily that we can review. And then I just have two minor adds to the September 12th, and we can leave it in the consent if we add just those two words.
Okay. All
It's
right,
kind
when
of
we
a-
get there, we'll.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I know there was a concern that Manager Schmaltz had posted about the August 26th joint board meeting minutes, just one item about,
Me not being there?
yeah, about you adjourning the meeting,
Yeah.
but not being present, so we'll just have to update that one and send it back through, so. All right, anything else? Chuck?
Mr. Chair, just to note it here, a question, there are several emails that Manager Schmaltz provided
Right.
to be distributed to the managers as part of the record of the meeting. Do you just want to make a note of those with respect to the agenda items that they concern as they come up?
Sure, I'll try to catch them as they go by, but if I miss any, let me know. I know we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like 4 different items, so I'll try to remember, but, okay. All right, anything else on the agenda? All right, we need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
All right, motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. All right, consent agenda. So for the August 26th, unless it's a simple change,
There was nothing there for me. It's the,
it's just who adjourned the meeting.
oh, yes. Mhm.
Did you have an update for that, Jessica?
Yeah, it was just, there was actually no adjournment made at that
Oh,
joint meeting.
okay.
Everybody just kind of got up and left.
Okay.
So that was just a carryover from the template we used to
Okay.
make the minutes. So the
Gotcha.
whole motion will be taken out.
Okay,
'cause it didn't
so we'll
have-
remove the adjournment item from the, all right. And then we'll pull the 5th, and Jackie will work with Emily on that one. And then the minor corrections on the 12th.
Okay, the first one's on page 3, and it's the bottom paragraph, the big long one. 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 rows up, and after report card style progress measurement, it should say charts from page 12, so just add the word charts there. And then on page 4, the big paragraph at the top, 7 rows up, in the lower St. Croix, it should say also based on geography
It's proportional representation,
for organizations in the lower St. Croix based on geography.
so add based on geography before the semicolon.
Meaning land area, of
Land
course,
area,
yeah.
right. Okay. All right. With those 2 changes to the August 26th and the September 12th, and pulling the 5th, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
All right.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Public open forum. Looks like we got no public tonight. All right. Citizens Advisory Committee update.
Mr. President, managers, a couple of just general updates for you. So I will no longer be the staff liaison to the CAC. Roxy has taken over that position.
Okay.
And then the other item of update for the CAC, and I think Mike can maybe explain a little bit more about it, is that at MOD this year, they're going to have a session about CACs. And our budget does have enough funding in it to send 2 CAC members there. Mike, I don't know if you had anything more to add on that.
Only that at our statewide administrators meeting earlier in October, we talked about this particular thing, or the topic of CACs and how to engage them and how, how they function, roles, et cetera. And, naturally, there's a pretty wide range of how they operate and their makeup, activity level, et cetera. But the group had previously, when setting up the conference, felt that it was an important enough topic. So our recommendation is to pass this on to the CAC. I mean, we have made note of it. If anybody wanted to come and this evening and comment on it, they could. But so the next CAC meeting, we'll see if we can get 1 or 2 members that might be interested in attending. And we should probably also, at the very least, make a reservation at the hotel in anticipation of that sooner than later. We can always cancel. Thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Aquatic invasive species update.
Managers. Some of the big updates. So as you know, commercial fishermen, WSB and staff attempted 2 carp removals on Shields Lake and removed a total of 61 carp with an estimated average weight of 14.75 pounds. Yes, that one specifically was 33 pounds and 3 feet long. So wow, that was our biggest. That was a fun one. Anyway, so while the total number was removed was not what we were hoping for, staff decided to conduct 1 more electrofishing attempt last Friday, October 18th, to better assess the actual population size in the lake. WSB actually just sent me an email 30 minutes ago with a recalculated population estimate, and they still think there's about 689 plus or minus 184 individual carp in the lake. So while that is a little bit of a reduction from what was originally estimated, it's obviously still very high. So during that electrofishing on Friday, Mary Newman is who I've been working with. We surveyed the channel from Shields Lake that enters into Forest Lake. We believe that they might potentially be using that to spawn in the springtime, so we will consider a removal treatment in the spring. We'll go over some approaches this winter for that. On to Phragmites on September 4th. Patrick from PLM treated the non-native Phragmites population near Bone Lake. Staff will coordinate a winter mowing to knock down the dead stalks to get the site ready for another fall treatment. While on this topic, in the past couple of weeks, I've been researching the extent of Phragmites and the issue of it in Minnesota, and reaching out to local organizations to see if and how they are managing it. Concerningly, it was discovered that of the 389 confirmed populations in the state, 74 populations are found around the shores of North Center, South Center, Chisago, South Lindstrom, and North Lindstrom lakes in Chisago County. Since the recent release of MACIRC's research on this issue, which they compiled pretty much a management strategy for every region of the state that has Phragmites, which is incredibly helpful. I have been in contact with other organizations, like I said, and it seems like they're starting to ramp up and design their own management strategies in the near future. It sounds like Chisago County is planning for something next year. They're obtaining grants and will be presenting them, I believe, to lake associations to conduct their own treatments. And moving forward, staff will research how we can help out in this management. Since we don't have many populations currently within our watershed district, it's obviously in our best interest, but also others' best interest if we get ahead of this and help out however we can. So we'll figure out where we fit in. I attended the AIS Behavior Change Design Workshop for the past couple of days. That was hosted by the DNR in St. Cloud. And I have brought back, I think, some creative ideas to help improve the AIS program. So in the past year, the DNR has been working on a community-based social marketing and AIS prevention project. The purpose of this project is to apply behavioral psychology techniques to address human behaviors that contribute to the spread of AIS. So through literature reviews, expert panel discussions, and online surveys, they were able to identify the riskiest pathways and behaviors that spread AIS. AIS program managers from all across the state attended this workshop and helped to brainstorm creative ideas to target our intended audiences and get them to adopt desirable behaviors. Summary of this workshop, or the outcomes from this workshop, will be provided soon, which will be used to help improve the district's current programs, specifically the watercraft inspection, and some tactics for dealing with bait laws and some other topics that they brought up. But there'll be more on that in the future. Lastly, this weekend is the last weekend for watercraft inspections for both our district and Chisago. You pull up the chart. Thank you. So it's a chart that I put together that it's from an Excel sheet that I've been using to track our hours. And as you can see, we are currently at 100% of our goal hours for Forest Lake. Let's see, 115% for Bone Lake, 108% for Comfort. Again, we had allotted, 2,700 hours for Forest Lake, 500 hours for Bone, and 525 for Comfort. These figures are accurate of last week, so for the final report, there will be an additional week of hours added to this. Susanna from Chisago County was a big help in strategically scheduling watercraft inspectors to achieve these figures. Staff will discuss options for the next season to improve the program and ensure the district has enough inspectors for the season. We ran into some hiring and retention difficulties throughout the season, and we'll brainstorm ideas on how to get more people on board early on and make sure that we're reaching these goals for sure. So, and that is all I have.
Questions for?
Yeah, I had a question on that Shields Lake drop in the carp population. Was that just an overestimate? There's more detail about that in Mike's admin report under 3011. That was almost a 60% drop in count. So is that because the population has gone away on its own, or was it just an overestimate the first time?
It's hard to say. There's a lot of variability in how they calculate these, and a lot of surveyor bias, I suppose. Not to say that Carp Solutions did an inaccurate job. But one thing that could have played into this is that we only found carp underneath one tree specifically on the entire lake. I mean, we found a couple carp in other places, but there was this one specific tree where we captured about 99% of these carp. So we think that maybe instead of doing random transects across the lake, they were electroshocking this one tree that was giving them that was overestimating population size.
Could that also be from the work we did on Bone Lake? And the work that we did with carp in that wetland area?
They shouldn't
a
have
report
gotten
last
into
year.
Shields Lake, right?
I thought that was Moody, that we worked with carp. It was the Moody Bone connection. We had the report last year where they talked about the number of carp that are, there's not a lot of new carp coming in.
Right.
So the old carp are getting bigger and they're going to die off and there's not a replenishment.
Are they dying off is the question.
Well, that's the question,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know.
Was that the Shield Lake report?
Yeah, that
I
was
may be getting
Shields.
that mixed up, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so.
But that's a huge overestimation, so I just can't believe that somebody threw a dart and said, we think it's that much. There must have been more to counting at that time.
So you think they just got a hot spot when they did their estimate the first time, perhaps?
Perhaps, I
That's
can't.
one possibility.
It is one possibility. I mean, it's very difficult to say, but I would, based off of what we were seeing, I don't expect there to be as many carp as what was originally estimated. Could be wrong, but that's why we're gonna take some time this winter to strategize another plan, and if we're seeing a lot of spawning activity in the spring in that channel, potentially do a removal then, and I think that'll be probably our best bet as to not disturb the alum treatment in the main body of the water, do something up in that channel.
Do something in the channel instead of in the lake itself.
Right. That way we're not disrupting that sediment.
Gotcha.
I just had a couple other points I wanted to make, since we didn't go through each of the lakes. But Lake Keewatin was the first one that mentioned purple loosestrife in my packet. I don't think I missed any others, but it's showing up in other areas, you've noted in the report on the admin side. And I'm just wondering, when we see that spreading as much as it is throughout the district, you're going to be working on a plan, I would imagine, on how to treat that. I think we've talked about this before, but make sure that we include the local government entities, LGUs, because, again, the more rural towns and townships were used to doing that type of treatment in the ditches, and I'm not so sure that they got along the shoreline as much, but certainly along the ditches. And they might have the qualified people to do that already and the equipment. So I think that's a good idea that we reach out to our local partners and make that a cooperative effort. Forest Lake, I had a couple of comments here. You talked about sending out a purple loosestrife bulletin to the Forest Lake Association to spread out to the members. Did that go out to all of the district lakes?
Yes, I
Okay.
sent them to all the Lake Association presidents, so they should have gotten that a couple months ago, I believe.
Okay. And then there was a very specific reference to the number of yards removed of native plants under the plant harvester update. And I'm just wondering what percentage that represents, the 384 yards worth of native plants. Is there any way, this is more maybe an engineering question, is there any way to estimate what that total native population is? And how much of it we're removing?
Mr. President, managers, you could do a rough estimate based on the point intercept surveys of the aquatic plants grow to a certain depth, so you could get some sort of volume, average height. You could do some sort of, density based on literature. But it would be interesting because, right, I'm not sure how much 384 is compared to the total. I would wager it's very, very small because that's the DNR's goal, is that we don't remove too much, so.
Well, if we have any way to approximate that, I think it's better than guessing. That is a shallow lake system there, so we have to be mindful of that too. And they're always going to have more plants than a deep lake, so let's make sure that we're not over harvesting. And then, this is, really pertains to all of the areas, but I just noted it on the Comfort Lake thing. It's talking about the delineation of the Eurasian milfoil and how the Lake Association is taking over that management, just like Bone Lake did. And I just wanted to make sure everybody saw the email that I think you sent out on behalf of Steve from the AIS meeting, and it was on, they're doing a study on the impact of Eurasian milfoil in particular on lake values.
Property value.
Yeah, property values.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. You all should have gotten it, and just make sure that you're, make that, a back note of that as we talk about this, because it's really valuable. And then I just have a suggestion, as we're dealing with more and more AIS species, I think that if we added another chart on this page of each of our lakes with a chart for AIS. And I've got some examples drawn out here, so I'll show it to you after the meeting, but it would help as we're going through these one-page updates that we have that information in that chart format. And we could, I think, on each lake page, have the date that we first discovered it. And so we're tracking time as well as the number. And then on the consolidation page, we can consolidate that just by lake, listing all of our lakes and how many AIS in each lake.
Okay.
So if there's board consensus on that, I think that would be a good addition to that report.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if it's not a huge undertaking to try to come up with the data, that should be here, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's got it. It's
should
just,
have all the data.
yeah.
Just a summary of the existing data. I had a question on the Bone Lake, the Villager Toe. Did that come up with anything? There was another one, right?
Yes, forgot the date, several weeks ago, but I have not yet received an email from them yet regarding that, but I definitely plan on following up soon.
Great. Any other questions?
I just had a clarification, John, one more thing. When you're talking about the largest Phragmite populations that it's being studied, did you say that the heaviest in the state is in Chisago County?
I guess, I don't know that's the heaviest. I would have to look back at that report, because the acreage can vary between what they define as a population. I just was kind of astonished by the number of individual populations spread out amongst those, 5 lakes I named.
Right.
But I can happily report that the lake associations are being proactive about this, and I believe Chisago and Lindstrom Lake Associations, something like that, I apologize. But they started treating for the first time this year. And it's my understanding, as of right now, that Chisago County will potentially help out next year with funding on that. But, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I attended the Macer conference in 2018, they had a presentation, and that is accurate that Chisago County has the highest population.
Okay.
They introduced it as a part of their wastewater treatment system to take up nutrients. And then, of course,
Got away.
being it's in the right kind of environment, right, it's so, there's an extremely heavy population. I think it's like in the Platte River, almost entirely, and then eastern Wisconsin has a really aggressively throughout the area there. We're seeing more and more in western Wisconsin too, and that's why for Minnesota and the eastern counties are really trying to be aggressive in its eradication.
Sure. Wow. Great. All right. Any other questions for Garrett? Thank you.
Thank you. And, sorry, Manager Anderson, you said you had charts to show me. Would we be able to schedule a time for that?
Sure.
I have to get on the road, unfortunately.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to old business, item A1, the Bantha property.
Mr. President, managers, so my memo was reflective. There were two items that were brought to the board back in 2018. One was October 25th, and the other one was like December 13th. And I was more or less just operating off the December one, so the October meeting had already gone through this watershed management plan criteria. But still, right now, we did, met the other day with Jason Neighbor and Dr. Funke about the property, and we brought a few slides, and really, I think what we're after now is we want to try to limit the discussion really just to the area of the Bantha property and the tax forfeit property, and not the entire Sunrise. The district did submit a Clean Water Fund grant application for the tax forfeit property, which is district-owned. But you may recall in the December meeting that EOR brought back a couple of different alternatives. And so then it really gets to this question of maybe what's the value, added value of this. So some information that we have now that we didn't then was a more certain idea of what the current landowner thinks the value is worth. So doing our typical, I guess, for the district here, cost-benefit analysis, we can go through and evaluate a couple different options to determine if the acquisition is within the range of what we want, or else at least inform the landowner that, well, the additional land would provide some additional benefit, but it's only X percent. So in order to maintain some level of integrity to our process, this is the value that we could offer it. So, but, so that I think from our discussion the other day, at least at the staff level, focusing on that question within the scope of work is really what makes the most sense.
So what you're asking then is for us to approve you working with the OR to develop a project feasibility scope of work that we could come back and approve to go forward on this particular 20-acre plot that's right next to our tax.
Correct, and I know that Manager Anderson has some additional information from conversations with the city, so this was an opportunity to bring that into the discussion as well, so.
Well, I'm going to move that we take this recommended action as presented,
What?
as presented, as it's listed here.
Well, for a second, I'd like to, there's a motion back in October that was made by Manager Spence and then seconded by you, and then it was unanimous that we weren't going to do anything more on this past task 2 of this memo until we, they were gonna do task 1 and 2 until we found out if we were on the same page. We weren't gonna do any more engineering or anything until we found out that, and I've got the minutes from that. It was, Manager Spence recommended that prior to approving engineering tasks beyond task 2, the district should ensure it is on the same page as Mr. Steinke with regard to expectations of property value and purchase amount. It was clarified that the district would only be purchasing 20 acres of the entire 86-acre parcel. And I don't think at that time we had a definite number from him, but we had kind of a ballpark of what he was thinking that it was worth. And at that time, it was significantly higher than what a lot of us thought it should have been.
Yeah, did you say it was beyond task 2 or only task 1?
It says, prior to approving engineering tasks beyond task
So
2.
it includes task 2. So have we completed task 1 and 2 yet?
Mr. President, managers, yes, that's the report that was presented in the
That's the report
December
that we have.
13th,
So,
in the link.
right.
So is this
Memo.
task 2 that we're talking?
No, this is beyond task 2, but task 2 is part of this report that we got
Right.
before. So we've completed both of those tasks that were in that motion.
I think
Right,
the
but we
point-
don't,
the
we
point-
still don't know if we're on the same page.
Well, but the point of this is to get a verified appraisal on the property.
Right.
We're not just taking his word for it. This is the next step to find out what it's really worth.
That was my understanding, is that we're gonna begin to refine our view of the value of this property before we decide whether it's even worth making any offer on it at all. So we've done task 1 and 2, but now we have to go farther to gain more information about its actual value to us, right?
Yeah, so Mr. President, managers, what we would propose, it's actually an enhanced task too. It's still that project scoping, but we have, with some of the additional information, now with the tax forfeit project and before, I think we had this last assessment, we can consider the cost of the project and the tax forfeit parcel, and then the added benefit of including that 20 acres. So there's both the, accounting for the additional phosphorus reductions. So, we may find, based on our estimates, we have better estimates of the flow coming in from the Himes Lake drainage and that load. The original Sunrise River flowage was based on the old swim model and a P8 model. Now we have results from the Bixby Park project of here's what an actual wetland restoration realizes for phosphorus reductions. So counting for all that with, an understanding of a little higher loads coming into the tax forfeit project, what's happening in the phosphorus reduction and hydrology, we'd get X pounds reduction per year. But then we have to account, the project costs so much. And then, so if we add in the additional cost, we could start with what the appraisal was. What is the cost benefit for adding in the Banta parcel worth it, or we just want to focus on the tax forfeit? Because we do have that grant application in. So I think getting to your point, Manager Moe, we would have data saying, maybe the district would only be willing to pay this much because if we paid more, it would put the project outside of our acceptable cost benefit threshold at this time.
And what we're looking for is an actual scope of work to come back that we're gonna have to approve anyway. So this isn't committing any funds other than the work to do to put together the scope of work tonight.
Yep, so we can lay that out better and you
Right.
could consider it and see
Yeah.
if that's still something you want to pursue.
All right,
Jackie,
well,
you
then
had-
I will second. Did you want to enter in anything that did Manager Small say anything about this, that?
He had made a comment that the 10-15-19 proposal was completed in the 10-19-18 Banta review memo, but that all these 8 points had been already covered.
Correct.
So, but we're refining that at this point? I mean, this is an extension of that or an improvement on that?
Well, there's a couple things that Dr. Funke's already brought up. I mean, one is that then through this season, because it's been unclear, we have good water quality coming out of Himes Lake, and by the time it gets to the Sunrise River, it's, what was it, like 380 to 500 pounds a year. So, so something was happening in between. Our goal is to try to use some of the IO rodeo technology, and try to get out there and figure out what that source is. But at the same time, we have a district-owned property where we could potentially do a project that could have some additional benefits, beyond just phosphorus reduction. And we've applied for a Clean Water Fund grant based off of the information that we had obtained through the summer. So there's this additional information on the monitoring, or at least increased confidence level of the actual data numbers there. We have a known, or pretty close to known value, and again, so we have the ability to really do this cost-benefit analysis to see in advance of what we think is a good application for the Clean Water Fund, at least start moving this project back along, at least get through this question as to whether or not that property is within the realm of what the district wants to pursue an appraisal for and an offer, if we were to come to that. So,
Okay.
All right, I'll second Jackie's motion.
And then I don't know if there are any other points in Manager Schmaltz's
It
thing.
said something about flooding. I was
Yeah.
trying to find it on my,
Yeah, EOR recommended, yeah, this is it here. The right to flow on the Ducharme property.
there was no clear conclusion, that's right. I wanted to just say that that's not true. There is a clear conclusion from that research. And Ducharme signed away their farmland, protecting the acreage that was higher where their homestead is. But the rest of it was all signed away, back in early 2000s, late 1990s, when that whole episode was going on. And it was to Washington County, as I recall, because there really wasn't it was mostly coming from them, I suppose. But anyway, that was at the end of the Joint Ditch Board time, when the legislation was passed. So, and it was, I think, for a small sum of money, it was $25,000.
Some amount, yeah.
Yeah, it was a very low amount, but they have the right to flood
I
his
think it was
property.
35.
Well, whatever.
Flood
It was a
easement.
small amount, you
Yeah.
know. But anyway, so that was resolved. I just wanted to make sure that that's not, that's countered in the minutes, because that's not an accurate statement. And then I just wanted to say one other thing. I had talked at a previous meeting about my conversations with the city. They're updating, of Wyoming, they're updating their comp plan. And I went through it very thoroughly. And one of the areas that I was not aware of was this section on natural parks. And their purpose is to protect natural, scenic, wetland areas, nature areas, groves of trees that still remain. This area was quite heavy with hardwoods, oaks in particular, and maples. And so they still have a few stands left in the city. And so this is a beautifully written ordinance to protect all of that. And if we can get partners to help us with this, as well as other purchases in that area, even our tax forfeit land, they can turn into educational parks on wetlands and the value of wetlands. So we can bring other partners in. And I'm certain that the counties, both Washington and Chisago, would want to be a part of that as well.
So there's other opportunities for funding the purchase
Yeah.
of the property, if it turns out to be of value. that
Or
we-
cooperating. So we'll get the
Yeah.
benefit of the water quality and quantity issues, and then also the benefit of parks and natural parks and education opportunities.
More than one thing. Okay.
Chuck seemed to have
Chuck,
this.
yes.
Just to add two things. One is just to add a bit to Manager Anderson's comment about the Ducharme property. The right to flow the property is established by the easement. I think perhaps what Manager Schmaltz is referring to is that the additional question of whether that easement also gives the holder the right to go on the property and modify it, do earthwork or vegetation work. That's an additional piece that isn't necessarily clear that the easement gives that. That was kind of up in the air.
But we have no plans to do that on the Charm property, right? I mean,
correct.
we're working on other properties.
Right.
And we just may back up more water onto the Ducharme property, depending on how we don't plan to, but it's possible, right?
But just to affirm what Manager Anderson said, that. the
So
right of
flowing
flowage
water is
Is
okay.
clear.
I think we need to make an affirmative statement, though, that that is not the intent or purpose, is to back up water on anybody else's property. It's to utilize those properties that we have, and there might even be a lowering of the water that goes onto the Ducharme properties. That's more likely the scenario.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Go.
Well, I have one other comment,
Yeah.
different topic, but for the board and for Mike, is that an additional piece pertaining to the appraisal would be when it would be timely, and whether the board would want to see a proposal for an appraisal and an amount, or whether that's something that Mike would just determine on his own. But there'd be presumably potentially two criteria that the board would apply in making a decision about what it's willing to pay. One of them is not to pay above market value, but then the other is not to pay above project-based value.
Mike, you had a comment?
Yes, managers, just on the technical side, by diverting water into the wetland, we would for sure, if anything, it would alleviate issues because we would be putting less water into the main channel, so more of the main channel could just flow versus, hydraulically, you would be competing, so to speak. You would take that and put it into the larger wetland complex, so it would be a benefit overall to the, to such property as Determ or anybody else. We would not be backing up or increasing levels.
Good. Just wait. Great. All right. Anything else on the Bantha property discussion? Oh, we've got a motion and a second.
Yep.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All right, workload analysis and visioning, item A2.
Mr. President, managers, the board has seen this and has reviewed it. And in line with the direction previously from that, Manager Spence and I got together, and then I understand that it was reviewed also with Manager Anderson. And so we put together this timeline. We also took in any edits that were offered for the actual RFP itself. So if there's any other comments?
I have one comment, and I did not see this after the meeting. I made my comments during the meeting. And I still have a problem with how tight that deadline is for the proposals after the final answers have been published to all of the people submitting. And I would just recommend that we move that. That's the day before our meeting, I think, right?
Yes.
So if we move that to the 25th, which is the Monday after Thanksgiving, it gives the people submitting proposals a full 2 weeks instead of a shortened period of time. And then the board workshop to discuss is 12/12. And if we get those items to us on as quickly as you can after that date, whether it's the 11/30 or the first part of December, we still have 10 days ourselves to review that material. So it's not harming anyone or the process, it's just providing more opportunity for good proposals to be presented,
Sure.
okay?
Yeah, I think our thinking on that was if we get them the day before our meeting, then we could just hand them out at the meeting. It was just more convenient, and we'd have them to review, but you're right, the time is not short between that and our workshop, so.
Well, it's tough putting together a good proposal, and, I've done that in business many times in big contracts, and the more time you have to double-check your work or have other people check it so that you can make sure your presentation is as good as it possibly can be, that only helps us.
So that was the only change?
That was the only change, and so that would make it, I didn't look at that, but if we move it to like the 27th or 28th of November,
The 28th is is Thanksgiving. 25th is Monday
okay?
before Thanksgiving.
Well, the 25th is when the proposals come in to you, to the staff. So how fast can you get those out to us? I think, as I said, if we get them even the beginning of December, giving your team an opportunity to make copies and so forth and get them out, we still have 10 days as a board to review that material, which is adequate.
So if we get it.
Well, I think we could we can just put them in the mail at the very least
Sure,
Sure.
you know, by
mm-hmm,
probably the next day even, if not
Sure.
Wednesday.
okay.
And they'll be to us in a couple days. So by December 2nd, for sure, the way it looks, wouldn't be a problem.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So that sounds good. Gives us time. Okay? Yes, and Manager Smalls had some comments. I understand Steve's first comment about the request being somewhat vague. But we do state what our objective is, to ensure the district resources are sufficient, and then also then to dovetail with our workload analysis for the next 10 years. And I think one thing that might be missing is the emphasis on.
I didn't catch that.
Oh, shush. Not talking to you. The emphasis on that this workload is feeding into a larger kind of scope of also then planning a future home for the district, and I don't know. And Steve sort of alludes to that. I mean, we're talking about the decision, including something about the facility decision that we're trying to make as well. Whether we stay in the lease space or build our own facility. So what does the rest of the board think about expanding the RFP to include information like that? And is Steve's discussion adequate to make that adjustment to the project part of the RFP? For item 1 in his.
Well, I thought that's what this whole thing was about. I mean,
It
what's
is,
the confusion? I
but
don't-
this doesn't say anything about that. If you look at the
Oh,
project, it doesn't have those words in it. It doesn't say what Steve is suggesting here. It just says that to ensure district resources are sufficient for meeting our planned goals and objectives, by conducting a detailed workload analysis for the next 3 years, plus really then for the next 10 years, leading into a decision about whether we continue to lease space or build our own facility. So maybe.
Oh, wait a second, I think this is the first step, though. This is really for, this is that PrAP assistance grant. So that's for, in my opinion, that is for the administrator and staff, and us as well, but mostly their input on what the next 10 years looks like for the district. And they, you know, you would mention that we're looking at a new building, you would mention that we're looking at, you know, all of these other activities that we have, but it's, to me, more of an assessment on staff
On
that we're going
workload,
to need.
right.
And we need to know that before we can plan a building.
Right.
And
And
so, to me, this is a first step in that process, and we would hire not a firm like this or a person like this, but more of an architect, consultant type company that would help us with building design and placement and so forth.
Right. Yeah, and we have talked about that. This is a multi-step process.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, I mean, I assume that that's what you felt, Mike, as well, that this was step 1 of multiple steps?
Yes, I thought that was, I guess, the intent of what, my interpretation of what the board was communicating earlier was that, you know, we, by getting through this first piece, then that would guide the board.
Set us up.
Right. As to, I mean, you know, we know there will be continuous changes, and we also know there's gonna be ongoing, I mean, the Met Council, I've said this before, has, you know, established, or their estimate is that the 35 corridor coming through here is gonna be the fastest growing area in the Twin Cities in the next 20 to 25 years. So how do we get in position to be in front of the kind of issues that come up with that sort of pressure on our natural resources, you know, and so part of it is looking at what's been developed behind us, you know, so to speak, to the south, and then making sure that through good stormwater management, planning, assisting our LGUs in some of those areas, the large wetland complex restoration pieces, all these pieces, so what is that, but then what does it mean, putting something down, then that the community, through community engagement, that we can get support on, and then take that next step, and that's why we're trying to do it now, because, you know, we're in a somewhat of a dysfunctional office space, and we need to do something.
And it's not that these items that Steve lists aren't things we're gonna get to eventually, it's just that it's not part of phase one of the RFP.
No, and, you know, like I said, and Mike has said, we need to look at where the district's going to be in 10 years before we can even talk about a building. And we are at kind of, we're not quite there yet, but we're almost at the point where we're going to be focusing more on the technological services and assistance that we can give to our local government units to inform better land use planning decisions.
Right.
And that means more staff.
Right.
How much more, we don't know, but that's going to be a key component as that shift occurs over the next decade or so.
So we're still okay with the RFP as proposed?
I think
It's getting
so.
at the point that we want to get at. And then we'll see what proposals come back, and that's part of the review process going forward. Okay.
And it gives us the foundation to proceed with the building
Yes, right.
issue as well.
It puts that block in place.
Right.
That big rock. Okay, so we've made an update to the schedule. We're okay with that. The RFP looks okay to everyone as it is? Because we're gonna release it tomorrow, right? I mean, that was the intention.
Correct.
With that one change in date.
That's our schedule, yeah.
Yeah.
But the RFP itself is a separate thing, and that's going out. So we'll go forward, we'll change the deadline for firms to submit proposals to 11/25/19. And then after the proposals are received, Mike and staff will package them up and mail them out to us, and we'll have them forthwith after that.
By 12/2.
Yeah. Should be, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I will make the motion to approve the RFP. And we don't have a recommended one here. And for the changes as made to the timeline, and direct staff to release the RFP.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. All right, employee benefits discussion. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I got them out of order somehow. I had the comprehensive data review workshop next. I guess I missed that.
Yeah, I did too, so it's probably mine.
All right, so the employee benefits discussion.
Mr. Manager, President, Managers, I'll also hand out, I was able to, well, at Manager Anderson's request here, we put together a little bit of additional information. And if anybody else wants them? Sure, please, thank you. So presently, the district does not offer health insurance benefits beyond the employee themselves. And we had several discussions earlier in the year, May and June, and the board had made a commitment to establish that by the beginning of the year. So just wanted to put some information in front of you about what the potential costs are, or where we're at. And then probably the biggest item to focus on is that the information that we received previously from our insurance company about what other watershed districts in particular are offering. And to make a decision from there.
So, right now, this estimate does not have the split between employer and employee in it? But the 3,790 per month? Is that assuming 100%, or is that just the cost?
Right, and that would be,
That's the health partner's cost.
right, the total,
Okay.
mhm.
And then, so,
And that would be with the, well, based on below 5 employees. And I just made the suggestion that we just say an average of 30 years old for employees. And then 4 spouses and 2 that would have dependents.
okay. Okay.
Presently, we have just 3 employees on our current policy, but that's, I think if we offered it, it might, this would presently the maximum that we would likely see.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think there's a mistake, though, in this information. The dependents, if you look on page, again, there's no page numbers, but in the Health Partners packet, on page 5, it's the breakdown of premiums by age. And then the narrative underneath, the first bullet point, in accordance with ACA regulations, Health Partners charges premiums for up to 3 dependents under age 21, regardless of family size. So how I read that is that it's a $330 premium for each of those 3 children, and then after that, it stays at that level. So if they have 3 children, it's the same as if they had 10 children. But it's not $330 for 2.
Well, that's
Or per
only,
employee.
so that's meant to be 2 employees would have dependents. So, and for each of them, it's just a flat rate of whether they have 1 child or 3, it would be $330.
Well, that's not how I'm reading it, though. It's $330 per each of those first 3 children. And then it's frozen at that 3rd child level if the family's bigger than that. So if they have 2 children, it's $660, $330 apiece. If there's 3, it's $990. And then it stays at that $990 for the whole family, all the rest of the children. It's a flat rate after that time.
I've not seen that reference. Is there a place?
On page 5, it's the first bullet point under the
Under that chart,
chart by age.
Oh, okay, all right, now I see.
so it's 1, 2, or 3, but 3's the max.
Correct.
And it's not 3 for
Right.
all, it's however many you have.
Right. So if they had 1 child, it'd be $330. If they have 2, $660. 3 or more,
It'd be
it's $990.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's it, so, yeah.
And we don't know now how many children are involved, and that changes, of course, over time with employees, but just so that we understand
Right.
what that amount maximum can be.
So if we had 2 families with 3 dependents each, that would change the maximum from 3790 to 5130 by my calculations. Just as a model, I mean, we don't have the exact numbers, but that's kind of the worst case number that, I think you were going after, right, was the highest we would have to pay. And then what that doesn't include is the breakdown of who pays what percentage yet,
Correct.
so, okay.
Above it does, it's.
Right.
Because we have.
See that the other 2 do, but,
Right.
I think the agency should be able to provide us with more accurate information. So we can't ask age, but they know it because it's part of the submittals. And then the dependent coverage, there has to be some form that the employees fill out that include how many dependents and if they're child or spouse, and then what kind of deductions they want, out of their, we've all done those setup forms, so you know what that routine is. And then once that information gets into the agency, we'll have a really good understanding of what kind of coverage. But the question, I think, tonight is what percentage do we want to contribute to the dependent coverage? And a spouse, if you just, I have no idea what age our people are, but if we just take the, let's say, the 35 range to the 45 range, because I don't think we have anybody over that. So at the top level, that would be for a spouse and an employee, that would be about 1,100. These are just estimates, but 1,100 for that, and assuming that they have 3 children, then we've got 990. So that would be $2,090 for that one family. And if it's at the 35 level, we're looking at $900 roughly for both employee and spouse. And one child would be $1,230 for that family. And then plus the rest of our employees, I think, are single, so the single employees would roughly be, just estimating, maybe $500. That's too high, probably $400 maybe a piece. So that's $1,200. So that's $4,500 per month. Okay, so, and roughly half of that's going to be, or a third of it's going to be a dependent coverage.
Right.
1,000 plus 1,200. Okay, so as it stands right now, based on our assumptions, we're looking at dependent coverage about $2,200 per month.
Approximately.
Yeah,
That's total, that's 100%.
that's 100%, that's total.
Okay.
Yeah, that's full spouse coverage and one family with 3 and one family with 1. So that's $2,200. And Mike, did you say that you had information from other districts on what they're contributing?
There's an email from our insurance
Yeah, it's in here.
agent. They had done a survey.
50 to 60% for dependents enrolled. 80 to 85% for employees, and 50 to 60% for dependents.
Didn't 2 of them go down to a smaller amount? Was it for employee?
25%. A few have gone to 25% or less in 2019.
For dependent coverage?
Yes.
Okay, so we're looking at 25 to 60,
Right.
the range.
Those are the range, that's the
Okay.
broadest measure of the range that they give, yep.
Okay. Well, I think we should start with 50%. And it would be in keeping with the level of benefits that we provide to our employees now. We've always had a very generous policy
Right.
as one of the hooks for a small department or a small agency to get the good employees that we want to get. So I think that that is a small price to pay on an annualized basis of $12,000 for hopefully that edge that we need to lure people to a smaller environment.
Yeah, I think 50% seems fair to me, that's what I was thinking too.
Okay,
So we want to make that as a proposal?
Yeah, I will make that a motion that we provide dependent coverage at 50% contribution from the district.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So was there anything else you needed tonight, Mike, for this? That was the big thing.
Right, that was, in terms of the action requested was that.
And we're gonna try to get this in place by January 1st, is that true? See if we can do that?
Correct, Manager Anderson offered to make a phone call today, because our agent was telling me we couldn't do it until 2021, but seemingly if we get an updated record of employees, form transmitted back to the health insurance company, that by the end of the month, they would be able to get us in for January 1st.
Nice, let's do that. Okay.
It's better for budgeting, for our purposes, because we probably will have, by the end of our budget cycle, we'll have that information for the next year, at least an inkling, better idea, but that's one of the most unpredictable things in budgeting is what health insurance is going to be.
The one thing is that we would probably at this point need to stay with Health Partners, so even though, but I've not been able to get other data on other prices, but
The last time we went through this, employees liked the Health Partners package, so I don't,
great.
yeah,
Hasn't been a
it's
call
whatever
to
they
change.
feel comfortable with. I mean, that's not most of them are pretty similar, but there are some differences, and that's where employee surveys can help.
All right. All right, comprehensive data review workshop. So, Mike?
Managers, I guess just as noted in the memo, the board had requested a special workshop to review this data more thoroughly and look at, if there's any other adjustments that they would like to see or additions going forward. So there were a couple of dates based off of some information. I will note that if we did try to do the November 21st date, that Manager Schmaltz would not be in attendance.
Right.
So, and then we know this is a topic of interest to him.
Personally, my preference would be the 6th, so unless someone has a hard conflict with that, then we might have to look harder, but.
I'm in favor of not having it on the same night as a meeting, because this can be intense, and then you don't have much time to recover before the board meeting starts, and that gets to be a long period. So I'm okay with the 7th. But I also wonder, again, if,
The 6th or the 7th?
well, excuse me, the 6th. The 6th is fine with me, but the 7th would be our normal meeting time. And there were conflicts with others, is that right?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I know for myself, by chance, my daughter has a band concert, but I didn't provide any input on that specifically, so.
So the 6th works better for you, Mike, rather than the
It-
7th?
At this point, but I
And that's
think
fine.
really either way, I think it's gonna be a board level discussion with Dr. Funke.
Sure.
I mean,
So I'm open to either. It sounds like the only conflict that Manager Schmaltz has, that we know of, was the 21st, but he was okay with the 6th, so we know that. And I'm okay with the 6th, so.
Yeah, I'm open.
So let's just shoot for the 6th, and it'll be at the office, right? This is not gonna be here, so.
correct.
Okay. All right.
Excuse me, can we reopen the discussion on benefits? I had one more question, I'm sorry. Has nothing to do with the dependent coverage, it's something else. But in looking at the sheet that has everything laid out, the group health plan for medical, and then we get into the life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment, that's a $10,000 flat amount. And I'm just wondering why it's so low. This is very cheap insurance to get, so why do we have it at such a low amount?
For which?
It's the principal group term life insurance and accidental death and dismemberment. It's limited to $10,000, flat amount. I'm used to seeing it equal to 1 times your salary. So, you know, if you're making $30,000, you get a $30,000 policy. If you're making 50, you get a $50,000 policy. And it's very, very inexpensive.
I think that we were just, initially, we were,
And then the other thing that I'm used to seeing is that the employee has an opportunity to buy up to that amount on their own, so they can double their coverage by paying the group insurance rate, which typically is around $3 a month. It's very, very inexpensive. So I think that we can enhance this benefit as well.
Well, this is both, right? It's term life plus accidental death.
Right.
So it's not just life. I mean, it's not just AD&D, it's also life.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's quite as cheap as that, but I know it's not expensive.
It's pretty cheap on a group.
So we can improve this area of our benefits.
Yeah, I would talk to the agent about it.
So we should come back with some proposals for what we can do and what it's gonna cost to do that kind of a thing. 1 times your salary and then be able to buy up to 1 times for the employee themselves.
correct, yep.
And then bring it back to us.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah, and then we'll vote on that separately, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We'll see when we get it back. Okay, so we'll do the workshop on the 6th then? All right. And item D, 1 watershed, 1 plan, and watershed-based funding updates.
Well, as president managers, we have a policy committee meeting next Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. And Manager Schmaltz is the primary, Manager Anderson is the alternate rep for the district. And so we're getting close to the end. The plan is being worked on, at least the implementation section, quite diligently at this point. A couple months ago, I gave a presentation on our PTM, and there was interest by the policy committee from that. But it really hasn't moved things, I guess, so to speak, in terms of what PTM, and the particular thing is just, again, just looking at the numbers. Presently the plan lacks the framework to prioritize in a way to make appreciable improvements within the time frame of the plan based on the limited funding. So we know now also that we would probably expect somewhere around 400,000 a year, maybe 5. But going forward, as more and more One Watershed, One plans come online, that money's gonna be, spread out even further. And, we don't see any major shifts in the amount that's currently going to the agency. So, we may even get less money in the future. So 400,000 across this sort of scale. And I did some kind of mental math earlier today, and I think it's right. That'd be for 136,000 acres. That's about $4 or less an acre. of what we could do, you know, on the ag side. So, so the need to really focus, and so we want to come back, or at least meeting with the managers over the last couple of days, is to go into Monday again and try to give maybe a sample outline of what prioritized targeting and measurable means from a watershed district that has demonstrated success through the methodology that we have been employing. So, and I've been asking for comparable information. I'm not seeing it. So, you know, from a taxpayer standpoint, you know, I want to know if your approach is the way to go, then show me the numbers. So, but I think overall, you know, there's kind of two sides of it. The overall effort is to be a plan that you can use for anything. It's going to be their county, you know, water plans for the SWCDs and for the counties if they want to adopt it. It could be a supplemental addendum to our plans if we so inclined. So it does have that utility, but in reality, still a plan, even like our watershed management plan, needs to have focus, you know. So, and then there's a difference between having a plan that's going to be implementing conservation for that purpose. I mean, pollinators and everything else, but then one that's going to be a water focused plan for surface waters, et cetera, in which, I mean, we would think that the taxpayers would want us to focus on surface water and improvements thereof. So, so we want to kind of make our sort of last pitch here, if you will. We wanted to make sure that the board was supportive of this discussion and what we want to do. We'll see if anything really changes in the format or structure. At the end, the Bowser guidance, you know, provides some pretty strong language about use of prioritization. And in fact, if you're not achieving your performance, you're supposed to give the money back. You know, of course, that's probably more talk than it is, you know, anything else, because most of the time, well, very few entities are doing any assessment post-construction like we are to verify that our approach and the engineering and design and everything is performing. So without measurements, then, you know, we're not going to really know. So, so based on a meeting then with Manager Anderson and Manager Schmaltz, we went through a few talking points, and Manager Schmaltz offered to put through kind of a flow chart here of what PTM means, and then maybe a path forward on this other document for you know, moving ahead. And it's, you know, it's still a plan that would engage would bring forth a watershed-focused approach for restoration of past impacts, like what we've been doing, but then also that we would look to engage the soil and water conservation districts on the preventive side, particularly through all the SWAT model and the work done by the St. Croix Watershed Research Station and others through the TMDL effort, the corn and soybean rotations and the impacts from that. So again, we want to not necessarily have a landscape scale program, because there is not and will not be enough money for that realistically. I mean, if you want to do something outside of the clean water funds, fine, but you know, right now everybody's at the table because there's clean water fund money. So let's be realistic about that. You know, if you want another program, then do that and state that, and then set your priorities within the plan, or you can make your own work plan in accordance with that, and but keep it out of the clean water fund kitty, so to speak. Sure. So that's the recommendation, or at least the thought process at this point. I guess I do appreciate the significant impact and interest that the board has had for the two members that have been participating, because it's been a lot. A lot of discussion, a lot of reading, a lot of reviewing, and a lot of meetings. And we would hope that, that we could take this and be more focused. And again, what the district has done, we've been able to show numerically that this approach is right. I mean, we can certainly improve. We're hoping that some of the Arduino technology will, bring down costs and reduce the time frame for doing diagnostic monitoring. I mean, so there's always room for improvement, and we welcome that discussion. So
We're trying to speed up how long it takes to go through this flow chart. That's what our
well,
goal really
right.
is.
So because a little bit to me, surprisingly, so we've pulled all this data together for the entire Lower St. Croix, and so we would think then that we could say, just like we did, we took our sub-watersheds that had the highest load and we started there and focused on them. So, I mean, the question that for me has been, why aren't we doing something similar? Why wouldn't we take, if we have some known drainage areas that are the highest load based off of RAPS or whatever, the PCA work or whatever that's been done to establish the TMDL and the total load, whatever, 82,000 pounds of phosphorus. I mean, so we should be able to then take that and focus it. Chances are it is all, in the northern areas, at least with my understanding, but let's have agreement really up front that that's what we want to focus. And then, but again, if your intention is to take the money and do landscape scale things, your probability of success is as close to zero as one would hate to be at.
Yep.
So,
Will you be at the meeting, this meeting?
Yes, I will, but Steve will be.
Steve.
Yeah, they don't allow the alternates to discuss. It's one voice per entity.
Will Steve
At
be
the-
there?
Yes.
Okay.
Not at November, but at this one.
Okay.
And this one's going to be talking about the entity structure. And it looks like it's going to be a joint powers agreement, at least the proposal is written that way, yeah.
Okay.
And not, because the choices were, become a separate district
Okay.
and have the same powers as a watershed district. And then to go through several iterations of a joint powers or a collaboration kind of structure. But it looks, the document that we got for review is based on the joint powers agreement structure.
Do we agree with that?
Well, we're still going through it, and we'll be talking more about it probably over the weekend before this meeting starts. But this memo that has the 3 points on it, fleshed out, this is after we met on Monday, Steve, Mike, and I. And these are the major points that we want to discuss with the policy committee on Monday. And pretty much sums up what Mike just talked about. The charts are just a first draft attempt. Sure. But I think you can see from just these hand-drawn ones, like Mike said, it's trying to get the group to understand what this means. What does it mean to prioritize? What does it mean to target? What does it mean to measure? What do those steps look like when you're actually doing work?
Right.
And Mike mentioned that there are foundational studies, we've talked about that before, that have been done on the phosphorus contribution to the St. Croix. Those studies have pointed out phosphorus as being the major factor that needs to be addressed first. And what I think is missing with folks that haven't done this kind of work before is that when you focus on that one thing, you're not only treating that one thing. The result is that treatment. But when you look at each area, you're going to find different contribution elements. And so it might be a wetland, it might be agricultural ditch, it might be urban, and you attack those things because they are identified as the highest contributing sources.
Right.
And so it's not that you're focusing only on lakes, or you're only focusing on, culverts, or you're only focusing on ag programs. It could be a combination of all of that. And so you hit on a number of these other elements that are on the prioritization charting by area. And so I think that needs to be explained a little bit more so that people understand how that function works. But it's just mostly an education thing. I think when you work at the district level, we're mandated to do things by science, by state law, and so we have to have the science to tell us where we need to focus. And our projects then are based on a prioritization of those focused areas so that we can hit the highest contribution sources first, which gives us the biggest impact to the water bodies, in this case the St. Croix, on a faster pace. And so it's exciting to turn in those big reductions so that people funding it, of course, understand that we know how to get things done.
Yeah.
And so that makes future projects then more likely to get funded. So we hope to maybe visually show this in the graph. And like I said, this will get cleaned up over the weekend.
Sure.
But these points that we have, we think are the major three. You don't want to overwhelm with a lot.
Right.
But I think these are the major things that we want to focus on.
Okay.
And if you have any thoughts over the weekend, call, I think Steve's going to be around too. Call Steve or I and make sure it's just one-on-one, though. And we can incorporate those into the presentation for Monday at the policy committee.
Yeah, Mike.
Amanda Anderson, did you want to touch on the entity framework some too, in terms
Yeah.
of the organizational?
Well, the joint powers agreement, I would like to have the board's permission to share that with Chuck so that we can get his input as well. So if that's agreeable to the board, is there consensus to do that? Yes? Okay, good. The joint powers agreement, I should have brought it with me. It's pretty standard, it looks like to me. And the way Commissioner Myron, what's his last name? Miron, thank you. Commissioner Miron talked about that quite a bit over the last few months, that counties are very used to working with these joint powers agreements. They typically have them with library systems, waste hauling systems, or landfill systems, and then sewers are often done collaboratively as well. And so each entity has a spot at the table. I did see in this draft agreement that they are using a proportional weighting for voting, not membership, but voting. Right, and so the biggest areas by geography will have, their vote will count twice. And then the next level down will be the medium range ones. They have a statistical data for that acreage. And those will have one vote count. And then the smallest, which would be the Isanti and Anoka and Pine, because their area is so small, their vote would be half a vote would count. So they did incorporate that aspect, which I liked. There's a chart that shows the ranking of these areas by county and coverage. And so the county, Chisago, of course, has the highest because it has most of the counties covered. Washington is second, and then it goes down from there. And then the agencies are ranked, and the SWCDs, because they are county-wide, of course, have the highest reach of an agency. And watershed districts are down at the bottom because we are only portions of these counties. And ours splits two counties, but we're still only 6% of the Sunrise River, Lower St. Croix watershed. I thought we should do it based on the Sunrise River, the reach of the Sunrise River in each of those areas, because that is the conveyance for all of the pollutants. And so if you do it on that reach basis, it becomes, I think, more quantifiable for doing project work. And so, so I want to have that added to Steve's list so that we can talk about that. But otherwise, they're headed in the right direction with that proportional representation, so that's good. The rest of it is legal stuff, and that's why I would like to have Chuck look at it from a liability standpoint and so on. But it's looking like that is going to be proportional to the area. Everyone is going to be responsible for their own area, in other words. So the entity is not going to have that responsibility. Okay? So that's all I know.
More on Monday.
More on Monday.
All right.
I would like to do an update, though, from Metro Mod, just to add to maybe what Mike was talking about. Kevin Bukulhalki was there from Bowser, and he was talking about this funding mechanism. And it's basically split east of the Mississippi and west of the Mississippi areas, and then north and south is the Minnesota River. So that's how those quadrants have been broken down for allocations, and it's based on the percentage of private land. And all of this is on the Bowser website, so I'm just giving you the highlights I wrote down. But the eligible entities are watershed districts, WMOs, cities, SWCDs, counties. And then everyone that's eligible has to have a qualified eligible plan to get money. And that means that it has to have those PTM elements in it in order for, it can't just be a work plan. It has to be a prioritized, targeted, and measurable plan. So there is a criteria in there that gives a little bit of comfort that those plans have to be targeted. And I think that's it on that thing. I did want to talk about another presentation at Metro Mod, just for a few minutes, if we're done with the One Watershed, One Plan. Are we done? Okay, there was a presentation by Houston Engineering on behalf of Rice Creek Watershed that just had me sitting on the edge of my seat. It was just so technologically exciting and advanced. And I'd like to hear from our engineers if they have something like this, or if we could have a presentation from Houston at our board meeting one time, at a time. But this has to do with doing a better job of predicting flooding and culvert capacity and stormwater ponding capacity. Ooh, jeez. Oops.
Speaking of flooding.
Yeah, no kidding. Speaking of flooding. Jessica, do you have any napkins that you can bring up here? I spilled my water. So anyway, this is a predictive modeling program, a software program that they developed. And what they found is that the ditches, of course, that exist are for a much lower level of precipitation than what we have now and what's going on now. And then also the soils have a lot to do with the function of the ponds. And so this model would allow the district to assist the local government units in planning with their developments to make sure that the ponds are positioned in the correct place for maximum efficiency. And because it's predictive, you can add in scenarios and predetermine all of this. You don't have to wait until you're right at the moment of making a decision. And it's also good, in that respect, it's good for long-term planning for the cities. And so I'm not sure if our government units have this kind of modeling technology, but if they don't, then this certainly could be an asset that can be shared with all of our local government units. So one entity doesn't have to fund the expense of all of that. It can be shared with all of them. But it's very exciting, and I think you get enough just from what I've told you, that this has just a tremendous, tremendous potential.
Is it like a swim model then? It sounds like it's just another water flow model?
Well, it has more to do, I think there's more interaction with the soil types. And so they can pull up soil types and use the soil types to help them better position and better plan for runoff.
Okay. That's not part of the modeling that we do?
Well, it sounds like some predefined scenarios with some of the inputs, but in a swim model, if you put in different flood scenarios, it sounds like though they just prepackaged it, so it's quicker to run, to do targeting.
Be something to look into and see what they're doing that's different and
Yeah, definitely.
take
I don't know if it's
advantage.
proprietary or not, but we should look at it. Because
That's a good idea.
It's very, very exciting.
All right. Anything else on One Watershed, One Plan and watershed-based funding updates? All right. So we have item E, summary of the administrator performance reviews. So we have to enter into the record the summary of Mike's performance review. Mr. Keeney's base salary is increased by 6% for performance, 1.4% for cost of living, additive and not compound, for a total increase of $7,544.36 in base salary for 2019. In addition, Mr. Keeney will accrue paid time off, PTO, in accordance with classification of 20 years or more of service. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions about that? All right, we're moving on to the reports of staff. Mike?
Just an update to, well, a couple things. I just want to confirm back on the benefits that the 50% is for both the dependent children and the spouse, correct?
Right.
So basically dependents.
Yeah, all dependents,
Okay.
yeah.
That's good. We have, discussed these informational updates, or I sent out this memo here on these watershed management plan listening sessions. So we've come up with a couple of dates, identified some locations, and then we hope that we can communicate with the board about establishing which board members will be at which meetings.
I think the comment had been made about maybe the Wyoming Area Library wasn't maybe big enough. Is that a comment? Could we do this in the city hall by chance?
We could, as I said, it's Saturday, the library would be probably more available.
Yeah, that was the only other,
I
I don't know, something to,
confirm those.
How many people does that hold? Do you know?
It's where we hold our our one.
No, I know, but how many people? It's set up on a square when we meet with the One Watershed, One Plan.
Right.
But there, how many rows, how many actual seats can you do? 100, 125? It's probably big enough for that, no?
I don't think so, no.
I know that Emily did get the capacity for each of those rooms, so we can check back
Okay.
against that.
Okay.
the community center in Scandia and the Forest Lake Community Room are pretty sizable though, compared to the library, so.
Right.
The only thing you might, and I don't know that, yeah, find out what the capacity of the city hall is versus the library and see if it's worth it.
You know, where we
Or the
could meet
church.
too, the Maranatha Church
Yeah.
has big meeting rooms that they make available to the public. So we could look at that.
Or the Methodist church.
And they're open on Saturdays.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yep.
So that would be the only thing, and I think I'm available that Saturday.
As far as I know, I'm available all of these dates. But I'll confirm and have to get back. But at this point, I don't see any conflict that I know.
You're not gone in January?
Nope, we're not
Okay.
going anywhere
Okay.
this year. Well, we might go somewhere, but not like we did last year.
Okay. I'm available on the 13th, and January's not scheduled yet, so. How about you, Wayne, for Scandia?
Wayne's hoping to be off the board by.
I know,
Yeah,
I know.
maybe, yeah, I'm not positive, but
I think Steve's probably gonna be gone. I'm open for January as well.
We'll make sure they get.
Yeah.
Between Jackie and I, it sounds like we can probably accommodate. At least one of us will be there, and then whoever else can make it,
Right.
great.
What do you do with the mics?
Up there. Any questions for Mike on the administrator's report?
Messed up with the.
The only thing I can add is we're getting a lot of phone calls about high water and flooding and,
I'm sure we are.
yeah.
Is it pinpointed in any way, or is it all over?
That's all over, even Washington County made a request. They're getting so many phone calls that they've asked that we try to coordinate among, Public Works and and keep them informed of potential issues and things to watch for, so.
Yeah.
But I mean, in light of our conversation about future planning, I think that's one of the things that would be prudent or beneficial to the community really would be to look at opportunities where we can do larger regional stormwater projects or storage, either case, whatever it might be, in advance. So it's really these large regional storm or wetland complexes that, and of course, we're trying to bring in some of this wetland restoration pieces. We have our banking program, we have our Bone Lake piece, but this Birch Lake analysis upstream of there between Lofton and Moody, or Manning, we'd like to see, because certainly once everything gets built out and you have basements and things, then we really can start having issues with being able to do some of these projects and look how many 10-inch rains we've had over the years, each year really, since 2007.
At Metro Mod, one of the attendees was talking about their district's planning and so forth, and they're starting to question whether or not this should be, if this should be considered as the lowest precipitation over the next 10 years, because you don't know. I mean, it's been pretty wild and crazy, so in planning future projects, what's the level that you should be using? Because you hate to spend a lot of money on a project and then find out that it's not big enough, doesn't have the capacity that you need. So anyway, that's, something that's going around people's minds anyway.
Sure.
I do have a couple of points on Mike's review, if I can go through them. Under 1003, General Administration, this report was done on the 17th, and it's talking about the St. Croix River Research Rendezvous being held on October 22nd at the Lee and Rose Warner Nature Center. Managers can still attend, and information can be found, and there's a link. This is the kind of thing that I think should be put out to managers when you find out about it by email or maybe on a weekly blast update. Just one of those things that kind of falls between the meeting dates, but that would have been interesting. since that's going to go away pretty soon.
Well, the nature center's going
Yeah.
away.
Right,
Yeah.
the rendezvous will continue.
Yeah.
So,
But
so,
it would have been
Yeah.
nice to see the
Yeah,
nature center.
exactly.
again.
Yeah.
That's my point.
As an opportunity.
Yeah, and then under 3004, non-point source pollution abatement, looks like we had some visitors. Are these people from MPCA? Tara Klein, Patty Ray?
Tara Klein's with the Conservation District, so she
Okay.
works with staff on all of our initial site visits for any of our plant grant programs.
Okay,
So-
from Washington?
Correct.
Okay, and
Washington
what
has-
about Jean? Shrikus?
Those are residents,
Oh, residents,
and so
okay.
is Patty Ray.
Oh, okay.
She
I
happened to
see.
be on the
So they
site.
were doing visits.
Yeah, so maybe
Correct.
just identify those people, those names aren't familiar. I was wondering
Okay,
who they were.
Mm-hmm.
Roxy, of course, is our new person.
Right.
And then that just triggered something when I was reading this. For our new employees, when you have this all figured out, it would be helpful for the board to get an outline of the duties that each of our people are going to be responsible for. It just helps.
well, we'll, toward the end of the year, and we are certainly still, this is, I guess, as usual, work in progress as things continue to shift in terms of priorities and responding to changes, both in budgets or interests or demands or requests from partners, et cetera. But we'll put together a work plan for 2020 and bring it, for the board's at least review, but at least informing you of what we're intending. So probably, normally it's at the December meeting. So.
Yeah, we're used to changes. I mean, that's not a big deal.
Right.
It's just knowing.
We live with them.
Yep, it's just knowing who's responsible for what.
The staff
then-
would like to know too.
3006, just if you could give us a little brief on how the administrator meeting went. You had talked to me about a few things, and
Yes, well, I think one of the, I guess a couple of key takeaways is still the frustration, I think, on a lot of the One Watershed, One Plan efforts. We're just concerned that numerically, we're just not gonna see as much results if we're not gonna be more focused. Another was, there was quite a bit of discussion about how could we structure within MOD, or just by coalition of watersheds, have a contract for professional services for like HR attorney, because we are all independently sort of wading through all this, and so, and of course, there are now, well, every year and every meeting, there's a new administrator, there's a fair amount of turnover. So for many of them, they're trying to, as well, trying to figure out these things, and so having a resource, and so I did bring it up to Manager Anderson because of her role on the MOD board, and I think it's something that we would like to bring to MOD as a request, to figure out how we could put something like that together so we could have more coordinated efforts for more efficiency, because certainly this is an ongoing and never ever changing. And I know I received an email today about a new requirement coming in at the first of the year, I think on overtime, or I don't know what it was, but there's, if we would have somebody that could provide that level of service, so. We have started as well, earlier this year, a shared site for all administrators to share documents and information on SharePoint. But really lacks, though, still is some person still maybe being able to help facilitate across. So there was some interest in maybe again at MOD, someone, or at some watershed district where we could have somebody that would help and say, well, hey, look at what they're doing here, here's a good example. We talked about the permitting and the discussions regarding this coalition of, developers to limit some of the scope of the permitting activities. So again, how do we work together to normalize maybe some of the information or our forms or things like that? It has continued to bring forth some discussions. Well, just yesterday, I was talking with DOR about, there was some work that they're planning to do with Carnelian Marine on the GIS side, and I've have a lot of interest in using a framework like that Cap Region is using for managing their permitting program through GIS, and everything that it could bring, including having a device where you could have it all online. But I think it's a reasonable, question as to, say, for example, even the inspection forms, they would look similar across watershed district boundaries. So, because a lot of these builders are definitely, they're building in multiple, watersheds or even counties at any one time, and so there would be some consistency. I know there's always going to be a difference in terms of priorities for the districts. We'll never have our rules all the same, and no one should expect that. No cities or no counties have all the same rules, so, but I think, how can we continue to improve our performance, I guess, is really the bottom line.
Yeah, that was discussed at another meeting I went to with, sponsored by MAUD, for district administrators. It was to get input on the legislation that's trying to kill watersheds. But this was talked about, and they seem to be very excited about this cooperative effort. And the other thing that was real critical, which we never really think about, is the definitions. Definitions can be different among districts, and so having a common lingo, if you will, so that you don't have to learn, French or Italian when you go to different areas, which is what it seems like to developers. So having that constant form, constant language, including measurements when those are involved. I know we went through that with our rules as well, is to try to clarify those things that were inconsistent. So thank you. The other thing under research, Mike, is you and Blaine went to the MPCA meeting regarding experiences and research related to iron-enhanced sand filters. Is there anything to share from that, or what's happening?
Well, I think, now we're seeing, quite a few of these on the landscape. But again, we're one of the few that are actually measuring on the performance side and the out. But I did bring that up in my comments, that how important it was to measure, do that assessment on the, after the fact, to see if there's anything that's, and I gave the Broadway Avenue example, that if we had not been measuring, we would have never found that what really, amounted to some, almost like a truckload of material in the ditch that was blocking the flow, and then kept the whole system saturated so it couldn't function.
Function properly.
Right, so we wouldn't have really had any reason to investigate if we were not doing the sampling, so.
We also had that problem with the wrong soil being delivered at the beginning of that. Maybe that was before your time, but as that was being built, we had a higher output of phosphorus. And we couldn't figure out why that was until engineering looked into it and discovered that the soil was not the correct soil. And we had quite a discussion about, there are standards for sand that have been established for a number of years, but there isn't and hasn't been one for soil. And we had a visitor from the U of M research area that wanted us to participate in that study. And we eagerly did that, but we've not heard back any results that I know. So what was the conclusion of that research? Did they talk about soil standards?
The stormwater manual, I think, has been updated some of this, and I think one of the things that's come out of it is, at least from what I'm seeing, more and more of the designs do not include any of that
Okay.
for for those systems. They're just largely just now sand, iron hand sand
Okay.
filters, I mean, and.
So there was a
Cecilia,
positive outcome to that,
Maybe correct me if I'm
correct?
wrong,
Okay,
but.
good. Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't know if there were more questions, but I
Yep.
did want to remind the board that, that we've completed the Moody Lake treatment for alum, right? And that tomorrow we will have the open house and demonstration in the afternoon. You really can go anytime tomorrow, for, if you want to see the application in action, they'll be there from basically sunrise till sunset, and then on Saturday as well, so to finish the treatment. So for this year, I guess one other thing that's, just want to confirm that, that any of the managers have plans for the mod conference then as well, or we were looking to have those registrations in soon.
You took care of mine, right? Registration and hotel, or just,
So I have hotel rooms for all managers. I'll just need to know anyone who's not attending so I can go and cancel those. The registration hasn't been done yet because I do those all at once, sending in one check.
sure,
But it would be, in order to get that check on the next AP to get out, we would need that decision before the next board meeting, which is why we're asking now.
I won't know for a few days yet whether, I thought I was okay, but I may not be able to attend this year, unfortunately.
what about Steve? Any word? No?
I have not heard word from Steve or Jen yet.
Okay. Well, I'm going.
Good. We have one delegate for
Exactly.
sure. That's good. That's nice to know.
The treatment on Saturday, is that going all day, or is that early morning? I'm driving up to Spicer early in the morning for the MAUD meeting, so I'll be gone. I'm staying with a friend in Painesville that night, and so I'll be coming back Saturday. I'm wondering if it's still going to be going on around noon. Anybody know?
Potentially started in Moody about 1 PM to dusk, and then they went a whole day plus the next morning.
Yeah.
So by noon, you'd have a good chance of
Okay,
them
good,
still just
good.
finishing up.
All right.
Well, I think they're demobbing on Sunday, so that would indicate to me that they'll be going through most of the day on Saturday.
Okay, perfect. My last point was under, let's see, 5400 wetlands. And it looks like you got permission from a family to do the soil cores
Yep.
for the Northeast Bone Lake project, wetland project,
Yes.
so that's good.
Yep.
And that'll be taking place on the tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah, we'll be very interested to see how those come out. We've talked about a couple other things too, the potential for put a short riser on there's like a driveway that had been placed, years ago, basically across the wetland that goes to the lake, but, we'll do some hydrology work on it too. And some of you will remember Burl Halderson, that whole area exits through the family's property now where she lived. And, I think if there's a way to somehow give recognition to her, pointing pointing me into that direction to say, hey, there used to be an old farm up there, go look at, see what you can find. It'd be kind of neat to give some recognition to that through the project.
Yeah, she was a frequent visitor for the first 10 years, I think.
Anything else for Mike on that or on the permitting program update?
Just the permitting again, I like the year-to-date metrics broken down like that. It's so much easier to see what's going on. And again, I'm just expressing my concerns for the amount of activity in the Comfort Lake management area, especially the commercial. You know, there's 6 projects going on commercial, which means probably 100% impervious or close to it. So we just want to make sure that we're forward-thinking instead of reactive on all of those. And there's enough monitoring going on, I know, that we can pick up any trigger points, but there may be a few that we want to add up in that area just to make sure that our existing outlets aren't being overwhelmed. Okay, that's it.
Okay. I don't think. Okay. You are.
I just thinking managers, sent this to Jessica, just show this is the end of the Moody Elm treatment. On the first day, we had a little delayed start due to high winds, and it was also pouring, so luckily for them, they
But
didn't
look
have
at
to-
that good luck rainbow on the right.
We saw several during the field demonstration time period. A couple landowners stopped by during the field demonstration, but since this is the second treatment, we weren't surprised not to have a lot of turnout. And then Mike already mentioned this, but they're all mobilized. I heard from HEB. They finished up before the meeting started. So they're on Shields Lake Park, and they'll get the chemicals delivered tomorrow morning and start application. And then again, another field demonstration from 3 to 5:30. So Blaine and I will be out there. And then we're also have EOR staff up completing a drone survey of the treatment.
Sure
And then,
looked good on the tour.
pardon?
Yes, I said that lake sure looked good on the tour.
And then the other update on projects is in the Forest Hills Bank stabilization. Construction will begin on Monday and take about 2 weeks, the contractor estimated. That's all for me.
What was the cause of that backup? Was that the culvert? Some culvert was backed up?
In the Forest Hills Bank
Mhm.
stabilization area, so
Yeah.
it was a combination of just that early thaw and some ice heaves, or ice formation within the outlet channel. And so nothing was established yet, and then it got backed up around, and then we had reinforced the area where the current drainage pathway was, but then it short-circuited and went
Found a
around.
way.
And it was the perfect conditions to create gullies in the unreinforced area.
Was there some pumping going on at the time of the tour? Remember we saw that black pipe coming down the ditch system, coming out of the Forest Hills golf course? Right on that main road? I don't remember what that is. What is that, Everton? Anyway, the development that would be toward Highway 97. It would be, it was on our right side of the bus, so that would be east, on the east side. There was a black pipe visible in the ditch system. It looked like something was being pumped from one area to the other, so.
I didn't notice it. But we
Okay,
can
all right.
Keep our eyes out when we're at the golf course for the bank stabilization project.
Just to follow up on the Moody Lake treatment, I did contact the board, the township board president, Sherry Sterling, to let her know that, and their board, that we will be following up with any restoration or things like that. And then I kind of started the conversation again about, how much improved the lake is, and the township had been interested in, maybe getting a fishing pier there. And we had just had this conversation a few weeks ago with the city of Forest Lake about Shields Lake Park, about, it's really kind of a park that nobody really uses, not for much good at least. So there was quite a bit of discussion about partnering and contacting the DNR about their grants for fishing pier or something like that. So the township was very interested in our assistance, and so I think that I've asked Blaine to start looking at this as well. And so I think it's just another positive outcome of all this, that, you know, that we can, you know, continue to be a partner with them. And, you know, this, of course, was a lake that was highly impaired, and, you know, we're on the cusp of bringing it to the state standard. So,
Very nice.
Yeah, nice outcome. Any questions for EOR?
No, we're working on the 2020 plan, I know, so we'll probably see that January for the 2020 work plan, or
End of December, right?
December, right?
December? Okay, good.
For clarification, you mean of projected projects for EOR in 2020? Okay, yep.
This plan.
Right, but for 2020, yes.
Okay, Smith Partners?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
All right, report of the treasurer.
Well, looks like for a month, we had a total income of 10,634.79. And total expenses were 279,325.78. I'll make a request to pay the bills.
I'll make the motion to accept the treasurer's report and to pay the bills.
I'll second. Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Report of officers and managers. Wayne?
I just wanted to say I was at the Home Lake Association meeting in September, and Garrett was there, and he got a kind of a special shout out from Dave Bakke on what a good job he's been doing and how helpful he's been, and I just wanted to share that with everybody.
Good.
I also wanted to say, I know I'm winding down on my nights of being here, but I've always been pretty impressed with all of our staff and administrators, and it's been great working with the engineering and legal, and it's just been a honor and a pleasure to be on the board.
Thank you.
We've enjoyed having you.
Yes.
Jackie, anything?
I wanted to share this article from the Minneapolis paper. If you don't get the Minneapolis paper, they've been running a lot of environmental stories, water stories especially. So I try to catch all of them and pass them along, but if you get it, just watch that section. But this is on, they're titling it, "Where Are All the Pheasants?" But it's due to habitat loss from the conservation areas on farms that we've worked so hard as a nation to protect and set aside. Well, apparently that's converting back to tillable soil. And it's, the statistics are here. There's a map showing the area on the CRP lands that have changed hands. I think there's extra copies of this. Do you have an extra copy for Cecilio? But it's quite alarming, and just as we are trying to stop, of course, the damage that's occurring to the water bodies, this is going on in the background, aside from us. So, you know, I think I'm going to bring this to Maude, and I'm going to ask that we work more in coordination with the Department of Ag so that we can have a more coordinated plan going on, because it just seems to be undermining all the work that we're trying to do in the agricultural area. And, you know, I think it kind of speaks to more of what Mike's been talking about is farming smart, so that you don't need to take your product, your crops into those areas. And let that natural ability of the soil and the wetlands do their thing. It'll be beneficial for everyone. So anyway, I just wanted to call your attention to that, and I will take it to Maude.
If I can just speak to one thing on this here. Well, we just got back from South Dakota, so it started out that this would have been our worst year ever, but the farmer whose land that we hunt out there pulled it, well, you know, when crops got up to, and part of the reason they probably got up to where they were was because there was a lot of land enrolled in CRP. But when corn got up to like $7 a bushel, and I don't know what soybeans were going for, you know, a lot of these people were it's like, well, I don't see keeping it in CRP when I can get $7 a bushel for corn. So everybody was pulling it out of CRP, and next thing that happened was all the prices went down, and they're like, what, $3.75 now probably, or somewhere around there. Mike would probably know, but anyway, so we started out hunting on Saturday, and all the spots where we've got birds in the past, we didn't see, and I mean, there's shelter belts and whatnot, and sloughs around the, some of the dugouts and wetlands, and we did not see a pheasant or a deer, and it was getting to be, afternoon. And like I said, he had pulled his CRP out, now he re-enrolled it, but it's not, he's just starting to plant that, but he bought some land from a guy that had lived in Wisconsin and had it pretty much set up for hunting, but this guy had some of his land enrolled in CRP, and so we, you know, we asked him, can we pretty much hunt everything? Cause last year he wanted us to hold off on that CRP, but anyway, so it's like, well, let's just leave this until 5 o'clock. And it'll be right before evening, and that's when they're going in there, so we hit the CRP with about an hour to go. And we saw like 40 to 60 pheasants in the CRP, and probably 8 to 12 deer in there. And we hadn't seen a pheasant or a deer before that,
Wow.
so.
Well, they know where to
Dramatic
go.
difference. Yeah, they know where to go.
Exactly.
So-
Oh, my
So,
God.
yeah, and I mean, it's not just, when I look at it too, it's not, the CRP, it's good for the environment, but it's also good for the communities, because when hunting opportunities are better, it's like, you talk to some of those restaurant owners or bar owners, and they, in a couple month period, they make probably half of their income in just that couple month period during hunting, when it's good.
Yeah.
So,
I'm surprised that Pheasants Forever hasn't done a study on that, economic study of the impact.
well,
For
I'm
hunting.
sure South Dakota's doing it right now.
Yeah.
It's like-
Well, that's pretty
They
amazing.
had some figures on how much money that, like Brown County or something, how much money they lost, and I mean, their revenue dropped in half, like when the revenue coming into the county from hunters,
Wow,
and it was a significant amount too.
yeah, no kidding. Interesting.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Well, I have to say, in regards to the amount of water we've had this year, I have never seen my lake shore as soft as it is this fall going into the winter. It's always firmed up, and I could easily pull my dock out, and this year I wasn't sure I was even gonna be able to get it to come up through the wettest part of my yard, so I did get it out, but I don't know what's gonna happen next spring. I don't know if I can push it back in. I might need a amphibious vehicle to get it in. I'll just leave it where it is and let the lake come up around it.
There you go.
So. Okay, summary and approval of board direction. Chuck, do you have any?
Mr. Chair, managers, I've got board direction that the AIS report should include a chart format of all lakes and AIS species in each, and then also on the individual lake sections to include dates when particular AIS species were first observed. Then I have direction that Mr. Kinney should get information about life insurance benefits and return to the board. I will review the watershed-based funding joint powers agreement. Then Manager Anderson made several suggestions regarding the administrator's report. One is a mechanism to timely advise managers of events, such as the St. Croix River Research Rendezvous, that when names appear in the administrator's report, if it's not clear who they are, to explain. And then to, at an appropriate time, provide managers with something that lets managers understand what the responsibilities are of particular employees. And that's all I have. I don't know, Jessica, if you have anything else?
The only other follow-up I had was that Houston presentation. And then just having staff look into the capacity of the library versus City Hall versus the church.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for us this evening.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.